Just a Tuesday with Thai food I'd bought to surprise my wife, but she surprised me with my own business partner who'd already taken his shoes off in my apartment. I didn't say anything. I set the food down. I walked back out, and then I spent 3 weeks building the most precise and cruel thing I've ever built in my life. I remember thinking, standing at the door of our apartment, key already turned, she's going to love this. She did not love this, because when I pushed that door open, Maya was on our couch. The couch I'd carried up 4 flights of stairs when we moved in. The couch we'd argued about for 40 minutes in the showroom. And Henry, my business partner of 6 years, was sitting approximately 2 inches away from her. His hand was inside her inner thighs. Her hand was inside his unbuckled pants. And the way they both snapped apart when they heard the door, you don't snap apart like that from a casual conversation. You snap apart like that from a very specific kind of conversation. Hey, Maya said. Her voice was 3 notes higher than normal. She did this thing where she stood up too fast and almost knocked over the wine glass. Henry's wine glass, I noticed. I hadn't bought wine that week. Hey, I said. That was it. That's the whole greeting. 6 years of marriage. And that Tuesday evening, it was just 2 people saying, hey, across a room that had suddenly become the size of a postage stamp. Henry cleared his throat. We were just going over some numbers for the Meta account. Oh, the Meta account. Right. Because that's why his shoes were off. That's why the lights were dimmed. That's why there was Coltrane on the speaker. Maya's choice, always Maya's choice, because I was the one who liked Coltrane and I'd gotten her into it, and now apparently I'd handed that part of her over to someone else too. I set the Thai food on the counter. I said very calmly, cool, I'll let you guys finish up. And I walked back out the door. I drove for 2 hours. I don't remember where. I remember a parking lot near the old railway station where I sat for probably 45 minutes, not moving, just staring at the yellow lines on the asphalt until they stopped meaning anything. Here's what people don't tell you about discovering infidelity. The first feeling isn't rage. It's embarrassment, because I realized sitting in that parking lot that I had been the last to know. Henry had been to our apartment. He knew we're on our couch. He knew where we kept the wine. He was comfortable enough to take his shoes off. This was not the first time. How many times? How many dinners had I sat across from Maya talking about our days while she was carrying this? How many mornings had I passed Henry in the office hallway, and he'd asked about the apartment, about Maya, about how are things at home, which I now understood was not collegial small talk, but surveillance. How many people had watched me be a fool? I have this thing I do when I need to think clearly. I make lists. I'm an accountant by training. Henry and I ran a mid-sized financial consulting firm, 12 employees, decent enough that we've been talking about a third partner. My brain works in columns, assets and liabilities, credits and debits. So sitting in that parking lot, I opened the notes app on my phone and I started a list. I titled it, What I Know, and then I started a second list. I titled that one, What I'm Going to Do About It. That second list started with 2 words, everything, slowly. I didn't confront Maya that night. I came back around 10. She'd cleaned up. The wine glasses were gone. Coltrane was off. She was in bed reading or pretending to read. I showered. I got into bed. She said, "You okay? You left kind of suddenly." "Yeah," I said, "headache." She believed me, or she chose to believe me, which I realized told me something important about her guilt. She wanted an easy exit from that moment, so she took it. I lay in the dark next to my wife, and I did not sleep. I built the second list in my head, brick by brick. The thing about being an accountant, the thing Henry had always said made me the better half of the partnership, is that I am genuinely, pathologically patient. I can sit with a discrepancy for weeks without tipping my hand, just gathering, just documenting, just watching the numbers tell me what the numbers want to tell me. He should have remembered that about me. She should have too. Next 3 weeks, I became a different person on the outside while staying exactly the same person on the inside. On the outside, normal husband, dinner conversations, occasional affection, weekly calls with my mother-in-law, Sunita auntie, who I actually liked more than Maya by this point, which was a strange new feeling that was about to become very useful. On the inside, I was pulling thread. First thing I did was get into the firm's financial records. Not illegally. I had full access. It was half my firm. But I started looking with different eyes. Henry and I had a clean 50-50 split on paper. But there was a discretionary account we'd set up years ago for client entertainment, flexible enough that neither of us tracked it granularly. I tracked it granularly. What I found took me about a week to fully map. Henry had been pulling from that account for personal use for at least 18 months, not huge amounts individually, and 3,000 here, 2,000 there. But when I totaled it across the period, I was looking at 62,410 rupees in misappropriated funds. 62,000. I documented every transaction, dates, amounts, corresponding entries where he'd labeled them as client-related expenses that I could prove through client correspondence he didn't know I'd archived. Were not client-related at all. I made 3 copies. One on a USB. One in a folder on a cloud account Henry didn't know existed. One printed, sealed in an envelope I gave to my lawyer, not our firm's lawyer, a personal one I'd consulted quietly, with instructions to open it if anything happened to me. That last part wasn't paranoia. That was just good accounting. The second thread was the firm's second largest client, Desai Infrastructure. Desai had come to us through Henry's network, so it sat in his column on the relationship side. What that meant, practically, was that Henry handled all their FaceTime, and I handled the actual work, the reports, the analysis, the quarterly reviews, which meant the client knew Henry, but the client needed me. I started making myself more visible with Desai, started CCing myself on communications instead of going through Henry, started sending the quarterly reports directly with a personal note instead of packaging them up for Henry to deliver. Small moves, relationship building, you'd call it if you were being neutral about it. Pramod Desai, the man who ran that company, 60 years old, the kind of man who remembered every name and every favor, started responding to my emails directly, started calling my number instead of Henry's. Within 6 weeks, I owned that relationship. Desai was 40% of our revenue. The third thread was Maya's phone. I want to be precise about this. I didn't go looking for images. I didn't want images. What I wanted was documentation. The same thing I'd built against Henry. And what I found across 3 weeks of careful access while she slept was more than enough. There were 340 messages between Maya and Henry going back 14 months. That answered my how long question. There were photographs, not the kind I mentioned not wanting, but location photographs, timestamps, restaurants I'd paid for on evenings I thought she was with her college friends. There were voice notes, which I did not listen to, but which I saved. There were screenshots of my own WhatsApp statuses that she had apparently been sending him, the two of them laughing about something I'd posted about our anniversary. That last one was the one that moved something in my chest from cold to colder. I transferred everything to the cloud account, organized by date, filed next to Henry's financial records. Maya worked as a senior designer at a mid-sized branding agency called Prism Creative. She had spent 4 years building her reputation there. Lead on 3 major campaigns, up for creative director. Her professional identity was something she guarded carefully, the way people guard things they've earned slowly. I noted that. I filed it. I did not act on it yet. The fourth thread, was the one I pulled, in a person. Our social circle was a specific bounded thing. 4 couples who had known each other since university or shortly after, who did Diwali together and New Year's together and took a trip to Coorg every February that we'd been taking for 6 years. Neha and Sid, Priya and Arjun, Tara and Stan, and us. What I understood watching these friendships through new eyes was that Maya was the social architect of our group. She organized the dinners, initiated the WhatsApp threads, remembered the birthdays. She was the connective tissue. If the group was a company, she was the managing partner. I also understood that she would move to control the narrative the moment I moved against her. The moment she sensed anything, she would get to those people first. She would have her version ready. The sympathetic version. Mike was emotionally unavailable. The marriage had been dead for years. I didn't know how to leave. I had to get there before her. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I did not send a broadcast message. What I did was simpler and more precise. 2 weeks before the dissolution meeting with Henry, I had coffee with Sid. Just Sid, casual, unremarkable. I told him I'd found out about Maya and Henry. I told him some of what I knew. I showed him 2 of the screenshots, enough to be specific, not enough to feel like I was making a case. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted him to know. I did the same with Stan 3 days later. I did not need to speak to the women. Neha would tell Priya, Tara would tell Priya differently. Within 10 days, through their own completely natural conversation, all 4 couples knew. Not from me, from each other. When Maya eventually made her calls, trying to shape what people thought, she found that the room had already been rearranged. The one that cost me the most to pull and that I still think about was Sunita Auntie. I had been calling Maya's mother every Sunday for 6 years. Long calls, sometimes 40 minutes. She was a sharp, perceptive woman, retired school teacher, the kind of mother who had poured everything into her daughter and whose approval Maya had spent her whole adult life quietly calibrating herself around. I called Sunita Auntie on a Wednesday evening, 2 days before the dissolution meeting. I did not sensationalize it. I did not perform betrayal or injury. I told her what I knew, the 14 months, the service department, the evidence, in the flat, factual tone of someone filing a report. I told her before Maya knew anything was coming. I told her so that Maya could not walk into that conversation and manage it. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Sunita Auntie said, very quietly, "She will call me tonight." "I know," I said. "She won't know what you've told me." "No." Another silence. "You have been a good son-in-law, Mike." I thanked her. I said I hoped she was well. I put the phone down and sat in the new flat. I had already arranged it, a furnished place near the office, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, something closer to grief. Sunita Auntie had not done anything wrong, but the call had done what I needed it to do. Maya called her mother that night. I know because Sunita Auntie messaged me one word the next morning. Done. I never found out what was said. I didn't need to. The dissolution, when it came over the course of about 18 hours. I had scheduled what I told Henry was a routine partnership review. We did these annually, not legally required, just a habit we'd built in year 2 when we'd had a disagreement about revenue reinvestment and decided structured check-ins were healthier than surprise conflicts. The irony of that was not lost on me. I had my personal lawyer present. I told Henry she was there because I was exploring some personal financial planning, and she'd offered to sit in on professional matters as a courtesy. Henry had shrugged. He wasn't worried. Why would he be? I was the same guy I'd always been. I put the documentation folder on the table. I watched his face. Here's what I'll tell you about Henry Mehta, who I'd known for 11 years, who was the best man at my wedding, who I'd called at 2 a.m. When my father had his first cardiac episode. The man went gray, not a figure of speech. The actual color left his face, and he became a slightly deflated version of himself in about 4 seconds. He started to say something. I held up a hand. "I'm going to talk," I said. You're going to listen. When I'm done, you can say whatever you want." I walked him through it. The financial misappropriation, the company account used for personal accommodation, the dates, the amounts, the documentation. My lawyer noted each item, and Henry's hands were flat on the table and absolutely still, which was how I knew he was genuinely frightened, because Henry talked with his hands. Always, always. "You have 2 options," I said when I was done. "Option 1, I take this to the relevant authorities, financial and otherwise. The firm gets audited. Your name is attached to misconduct findings. The professional consequences are what they are. Option 2, you sign the buyout agreement my lawyer has prepared at the valuation I've determined, which accounts for the misappropriated amount as a deduction from your share." Mike, I'm not finished. I hadn't planned to say the next part. It came from a different place than the rest. "I've already spoken with Pramod Desai. No, he's confirmed in writing that his firm will be working with me directly going forward, regardless of the firm's structure. That's 40% of revenue, in case you want to factor that into your thinking about what this firm is worth to you without me in it." Silence. "You have until end of business tomorrow," I said. "My lawyer will be available." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked to the door, and then I stopped because there was one more thing on the list. "I know about the apartment near Sector 5, I said. "Tell her she can have the couch." The same evening, right before Henry could reach Maya, before she could begin to understand what was happening, I sent an email. I had drafted it over several evenings in the new flat on a laptop Henry had never seen and Maya didn't know about. The email went to 8 people. Henry's wife, Ananya, Maya's 2 closest friends from Prism Creative, both of our immediate families, and, carefully, specifically, Ritika Sharma, the creative director at Prism, who was responsible for Maya's upcoming promotion review. The email was not written in anger. It was written in the tone I use for client reports, factual, structured, appropriately detailed. It included a timeline. It included 3 of the location tagged photographs. It included the confirmation of the Sector 5 service department booked under a company account. It included the screenshots of Maya sending Henry photographs of my WhatsApp statuses, the ones where they had apparently found something to laugh about. I did not call Maya an adulteress. I did not call her anything. I stated what had happened, when it had happened, what I had documented. I did not ask for responses. I listed no demands. I said only, at the end, I am sharing this because I believe the people in my life, and hers, deserve to know the truth before they are given a version of it. I sent it at 7:43 p.m. Maya called me at 8:12 p.m., then at 8:19, then 3 more times before 9. I let every call go to voicemail. What I understand, and what I understood even then, is that the email did not wound her pride. It did not wound her in the way I could wound myself in the parking lot with self-pity. It wounded something more specific. Her authorship. Maya was a storyteller. She was the woman who organized the dinners, sent the messages, shaped how things were remembered. The email took that from her. Every person who read it received a version of the story she hadn't written, couldn't revise, couldn't get ahead of. The creative director at Prism called Ritika's extension the following morning. Maya's promotion review was postponed indefinitely. I learned this later, not from any action of mine, just from the natural consequence of a professional environment receiving personal information about a senior employee's conduct. And I had not planned that consequence specifically, but I had known it was possible. And I had sent the email anyway. That is, I think, the most honest thing I can say about who I was that month. I left the apartment 2 days later. Maya called 4 times that evening. I let it go to voicemail. Her last message was 4 minutes long, and I listened to it exactly once and then deleted it. Henry signed the buyout at 4:47 p.m. the following day. The valuation, after deductions, was 30% below what he'd have gotten at fair market. He signed it anyway because the alternative was worse, and he knew it, and I knew it, and my lawyer knew it. The divorce proceedings were where I exercised the final thread. My lawyer had already reviewed the financial implications of the Sector 5 apartment. Henry had funded it through misappropriated company accounts, which meant Maya had received material benefit from stolen funds, which meant there was a paper trail placing her inside a financial misconduct chain, even if she hadn't known the source of the money. She almost certainly hadn't known. It didn't matter legally. It mattered as leverage. Maya's lawyer called mine within 48 hours. Maya agreed to a settlement that was, by the numbers, significantly unfavorable to her. She took less than half of what she'd have been entitled to. She took no claim on the firm. She signed quickly, I was told, as though she wanted the whole thing to stop generating consequences. I understood that feeling, abstractly. I had none of it. I renamed the firm. It took 6 months to feel normal. Not happy, not healed, just functional. But the firm grew. Desai brought in 2 referrals. I hired a young analyst who was better than Henry, had been at 30, and reminded me what it felt like to work with someone honest. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Of course it was. I didn't want this to end this way, but sometimes you have no way out.